All right, welcome to Lab Assignment 1 presentation. Go ahead to the first question. All right, so for question 1, I think what happened to most adult males in the US who used to work on farms, they were basically employed into other industries. As we can see, farm states don't have tens of millions of people searching. For part B, very few people are going to be fixing farm equipment for a living. They're going to be participating in other occupations, offices, marketing, and producing food, etc. Go ahead to the next question. So for question 2, Milton Friedman's fool in the shower example is applied to central banking. Basically, changes in the market caused by a central bank take a while to become effective. So if the market fluctuates, the changes inactive now may become ineffective. Um, so question 3, basically, over the last 1,000 years, the fraction of humans who are poor fell, and the number of people living in deep poverty rose.
But when the question compares hyperinflation to losing body weight, it assumes that the hyperinflation is an easy problem to solve in concept by increasing the value of the currency and decreasing the supply by stopping printing more money and taking less foreign loans. But it is hard to people to get rid of their currency in order to increase the value. So it comes down to having self-control and self-discipline to putting for the individual to put these actions into practice. Just like how losing weight in theory is easy by eating less and exercising more, but it takes a lot of self-discipline and control to putting these actions into process. The opportunity cost for Erin to repair one transmission is 2 fuel injectors per hour. For Katie to respond to 400 phone calls is 800 emails in 2 hours. And for Deirdre to write half of a book in a year is 2.5 articles in the year. So here, the North has the advantage for making both high and low quality cars. But when it comes to comparative advantage, the North has the comparative advantage for high quality cars, whilst the South has the comparative advantage for low quality cars. And we've documented this in the tables to come. Here we've shown our values where it dictates the opportunity cost of each country to make the designated products. And here we've shown that through trade, if through specialization, the global output of high quality cars has remained the same, but for low quality cars, it has increased.
So for part 7, Kana can make both miso soup and can do both in 30 minutes, but Mitchell can make miso soup in 15 minutes and can take an hour to clean the kitchen. So Mitchell has an absolute advantage for miso soup, and Kana has the absolute advantage for cleaning the kitchen. And that extends to the comparative advantage because, that extends to the comparative advantage because they both have more to lose if they were going to do the other. You're good. For making cookies, Sienna can make 100 cookies in an hour, and Ethan can only make 20, so she has the absolute advantage for making cookies. Sienna can lay drywall for 3 rooms in an hour, and Ethan can only lay drywall for 2 rooms, so she also has the absolute advantage for drywall. And since she has more to lose if she was not making cookies, she has the comparative advantage in making cookies, and Ethan has the comparative advantage in laying drywall. For part C, Kara can make 2 glass sculptures per day, while Sarah can only make 1, so she has the absolute advantage. And then Sarah can make 4 full-page newspaper ads, and Kara can only make 2, so she has the absolute advantage in newspaper ads. And that extends to the comparative advantage because they both have more to lose if they were doing the other. And then for part D, Data can write 12 poems or solve 100 physics problems. So he is the absolute, and Riker can only solve one poem or do one poem or solve a half of a physics problem. So Data has the absolute advantage in both categories, but Riker has the comparative advantage in poems because Data has more to lose if he was not doing physics problems. So Data has the comparative advantage in doing physics problems. The question is asking about why is it not possible for all jobs to leave the U.S. Because the U.S. will always have a comparative advantage in some type of jobs. In our scenario, we're suggesting design and technology being the ones that would stick around. Question 9 is asking a theoretical number for scenario 1 that would allow the U.S. to have the comparative advantage in making airplanes. So if it took 1 hour to produce a car in Korea, the U.S. would have a comparative advantage in airplanes, and Korea would have a comparative advantage in making cars. And then for the second scenario, if it takes 20 hours to produce a car in South Korea, then South Korea has the comparative advantage in making airplanes, and the U.S. has the comparative advantage in making cars. So for the first scenario, the U.S. has the absolute advantage for airplanes, and South Korea has the absolute advantage for cars. For the second scenario, the U.S. has the absolute advantage for both airplanes and cars. And then the break-even point, where it's impossible that trade between the U.S. and South Korea could benefit both nations, is 12.5 hours to make a car.
So for question 10, the first part of question 10 asks us to make a combined PPF for the Mexico and U.S. trade deal. So as you can see from the graph, the final PPF is a combination of the first one and the second one. And the point A is where the trade deal produces only computers. Point Z is a point where the trade deal produces only shirts. And point B is where these two PPFs meet. So for question B, for the second part of the question 10, it asks us if so that Mexico has a comparative advantage in producing shirts, the US has a comparative advantage in producing computers, and the first line is the Mexican PPF, while the second line is the US PPF. Also, as a point in the PPF starts to move away from point A, it means that more shirts are being produced and fewer computers are being produced. And as a point moves away from point Z, it means that fewer shirts are being produced and more computers are being produced. And then lastly, in this bit, we're adding Haiti to the mix. This adds an extra notch in the combined PPF as an extra country is added, so an extra midpoint is added apart from the midpoint we saw earlier with point B. And then also, when we make a combined PPF with an infinite number of countries, we have an infinite number of slopes and therefore an infinite number of midpoints, which eventually this will cause the combined PPF to form into a curve with an infinite number of tangents. And then for question 11, this deals with the terms of trade between the US and Mexico. So the first part of question A asks us how do they both benefit from trade? And they benefit because both countries can consume outside of their PPFs. They could consume more than they would have been able to if they just produced and consumed within their country without specializing. And then the second part asks us what would happen if the terms of trade was 8 shirts to 1 computer. This would have caused the US to benefit, as the US would have been able to consume more, but Mexico would not have been able to consume outside of their PPF. And then lastly, the last question asks us what is the range of terms of trade in which both countries would benefit. It will be 5 shirts to one computer for the max, and then 2 shirts to one computer for the minimum, as anything outside this points wouldn't allow for both countries to benefit at the same time. This has been our presentation. Thank you for watching.